In 1607, the English arrived and settled a colony known as Jamestown in the state of Virginia. 13 years later, a new group of English people will arrive not in Virginia, but will get blown off course and end up north in what is today Massachusetts and establish the second English colony known as Plymouth in the year 1620. The Pilgrims are a group of separatists, a new religious movement taking place during the Reformation. The Church of England has now separated from the Roman Catholic Church, where it is Catholic in appearance, but in its theology and beliefs, it is Protestant. The Separatists are a group within Protestant Anglican England who believe that further changes and reforms need to happen, that the Church of England still is too fancy in its decorum, in its traditions, in its rituals, and these people want to have an even more simplified, pure form of the Christian faith. The Pilgrims themselves, again giving that name to their spiritual desires of seeking and trying to grow closer with God, of being on a pilgrimage journey to find that salvation and hope and peace that they want, are going to seek it outside of England and outside of the persecution that they are facing within their own homeland. They go to the Netherlands, a more progressive and open country to people of different religious beliefs, such as the Jewish people who are fleeing from the Inquisition in Spain are going to arrive in Amsterdam and in Haarlem and The Hague. The Pilgrims are going to arrive in the Netherlands, spend about 10 years there, but they find that the openness and free-thinking views of the Dutch is way too liberal and radical for their children to be influenced by. A group of the Pilgrims are therefore going to hire 2 vessels with a private contractor to send them to the United States. One of the ships starts taking on water. They have to redock in Plymouth, England. They all board onto one ship itself known as the Mayflower. And because of all the delays, the ship does not begin to set sail from England until now September, already leading into the fall months of the year when their original intentions were to leave in early May, so that the weather in the crop season would be much better situation for these 103 passengers. The original churches and settlements within Holland where the Pilgrims had been are still able to be visited today, as well as there is the marker with indicating the place in the harbor of Plymouth, England, where they docked off. They will go on this long voyage. There will be some complications with the boat during their voyage that they almost consider returning to England, but they feel that the religious persecution that they are experiencing in England is not worth it, and that for their own beliefs and desires, they are going to seek a new life in the new world. After leaving Plymouth, England, they will get blown off course by strong winds and end up in November of 1620 arriving in what is today Massachusetts, and will call their new spot Plymouth, Massachusetts, after leaving Plymouth, England. There is the iconic Plymouth Rock to signify the landing of their first voyage. Because they are off course, they do not have the full authority of the King of England to be there. So whose jurisdiction are they under and how do they govern themselves? They will, as the men, sign off on a Mayflower Compact to self-govern and oversee one another in this new colony. Many of the colonists are going to remain on the boat until houses and provisions can be made on the sandy shorelines of what is today Cape Cod, Massachusetts. Several of the passengers are going to get sick. Some of them are going to, as a result, die, and they find that maybe they have ended up in the very wrong location. But as they try and govern and coexist, eventually people such as William Bradford will come to be the leaders of this newfound colony and settlement. What the original Mayflower Compact looked like has been lost to history, but copies of the original document were within 2 years recorded back in London newspapers. So in Plymouth, Massachusetts, in 1620, the Pilgrims arrive. They don't see any Native American people in the region right away. They are dumbfounded as to why it has been abandoned. And in time, they will come across and meet other Native tribes in the Massachusetts region. One of them in particularly will be a local Wampanoag chief named Chief Massasoit, as well as a Native American named Samoset, and then another one named Squanto. Squanto himself, interestingly, because of previous voyages by the English, French, Dutch, and Spanish explorers, he is the last member of his Patuxet tribe, who was taken captive, sent to Europe, made his way to England, ended up learning the English language, and on another business venture voyage, ended up returning to his homeland. So when the Pilgrims do arrive, there is a Native American who speaks their exact language, and in the spring of 1621, they will teach the Pilgrims how to grow local crops and foods in this harsh, cold, rockier, and sandy region so that they are able to survive and live. After making it through that very harsh winter, the following year they will have an abundance of crops, and there will be a 3-day feast between Chief Massasoit and the Wampanoag Indians with William Bradford and the Pilgrim settlers. They will give thanks to God for arriving in this new land, for the comforts and joys and protection that they still have, and the colony itself will continue to thrive and slowly grow. The question is, did the Pilgrims really achieve all that they were wanting? They did establish a new colony that was unanticipated. Their spiritual community of living and bonding together never fully materialized, as many of them will slowly disperse and form their own farmlands and start to settle and populate other little communities around Cape Cod and throughout Massachusetts. Over the next few decades, many more English people will arrive and settle in what is today Boston, and the Mayflower ship itself would return to England, be used for various other shipments of wool and basic supplies across the English Channel, and in time just be dismembered and dismantled across and sold for scraps and is lost to history. The Plymouth colony in time will be consumed by a larger Massachusetts Bay colony by Puritans, who will slowly settle in the region 10 years later, and it will be the end of the story of this age of exploration, as now the region has been settled, and it leads once again to the questions as to where does America's story begin, because sometimes in textbooks and in classrooms, the story begins where we have ended with the story of the Pilgrims, when there have been many other events in earlier English settlements that all have had claims and a history in the region before. But by the middle of the 1600s, there is now a United States where there are French missions and cities developing in the Great Lakes region, in Canada, Louisiana. There will be the Dutch that will be settling in New York. There will be the Spanish that have explored and created settlements and missions along the American Southwest. And now the British or the English will have colonies along the Atlantic shoreline and slowly evolve into 13 colonies. And from there, we will examine what happens in these colonial lifestyles and communities in our next chapter. Thanks for listening.